Alright, let's talk about the books that I really didn't like in 2024. This list is one that I love to hate to make, if that makes sense. I unfortunately read some duds last year, but I always like to tell you guys about them. For one, because rants are fun, and for two, sometimes if you don't have the same taste as me, the worst of the year list may be your like recommendation list. There's definitely some people that I watch that I'm like, I know you'd hated that, but like I would love that. And so that's what I'm hoping that this will give to some of you guys. If it's not that type of video for you, I hope you just enjoy listening to me talk about these books. So let's start off with my most disappointing books of 2024. These are books that I gave 3 stars that I just really wanted to love more than I did. I expected more from than I got. The first one is Swordcatcher by Cassandra Clare. This book was making its rounds. Like, it was on some best of the year list. I think that's what I read it for last year. And I really enjoyed the Mortal Artifacts, the Mortal Instruments series by her, but this book was just so incredibly boring. There was nothing inherently wrong with it. I couldn't tell you the first thing about the plot. I couldn't tell you how it ended. Like, there's no way I could pick up book 2 even if I wanted to, because I remember nothing about this book. It was fine. It was quintessentially fine. And unfortunately, I was not expecting that because it was on people's best of the year list. I expected to fall head over heels in love with it, and instead I struggled to make it through this book. It was way too long. I do remember that much. And it was hard for me to get through it. The next one is Girl in the Mountain by Mark Lawrence. I was so disappointed in this book. I had heard that it was some of people's like favorite book in this whole Book of the Ice, Book of the Ancestor world, that it was incredible. It pulled things together in the best way, made people cry. Like, I was expecting 10 out of 10 incredible, and what I got was kind of boring and not exactly like it was coherent, but I don't know. I was expecting way too much from this book, I think, and when it didn't deliver on that, I was just so sad. Yeah, it brought us some answers and it had some really good ties to the rest of the books in the series, but unfortunately, I didn't get the gut punch. I didn't get the feels. I didn't ever connect to the characters enough that I was like, oh my gosh, what is happening? I just didn't care, and so definitely disappointing. Then we have The Tainted Cup. I know I'm breaking people's hearts right now. I'm picking some favorite books. I know this is going to be on some best of the year list, but The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. I probably will continue in this series. That's why it's ending up on the most disappointing side of the scale instead of the worst side of the scale. But like, everybody was raving about this book, and I don't really understand the hype. Maybe it's just because I didn't like the slow mystery part of it. I don't really know, but our main character just felt like a robot, and I know that was a little bit intentional, but like, it didn't work. I understand why he did it, but like, you've got to give me something to care about, something to latch onto. And unfortunately, like, even though the world was pretty interesting, it wasn't well fleshed out enough to make it super interesting. And then the mystery was kind of like threaded in between everything, but also I didn't overly care about that because it was just him going somewhere, talking to somebody, getting the information he needed, and moving on to something else. So I never felt like it was a true mystery, that we were learning things and having to work for things, because he wasn't having to work for anything. I just was, yeah, it was not the best book for me. We had a book club discussion and I just kind of like sat there quietly while everyone gushed about it, because it was not a gush-worthy book for me. So anyway, before people come for me in the comments, we're gonna move on and go with Five Broken Blades next. No, it was just not it. There was attempts at romance, but it felt like high school drama rather than actual romance, and it was boring, and the only character that I cared about had such minimal page time. The audiobook was not good at all. It was like the voices were different speeds and they were different volumes, and the narrators I could barely understand sometimes, and just the whole experience was not a good time. I don't remember enough about it to give you a true rant because I think I blocked it out of my brain. But yeah, I didn't like that one. And then last but not least was really just disappointing for me, and that was Fear the Flames by Olivia Rose Darling. I didn't hate this book. I gave it a 3 star. I stick with my 3 star. I will probably try the next book in the series, But given the fact that so many people were raving about how good the banter was and how incredible this book with all of these dragons was, I was expecting a lot more from it than what I feel like I got. The banter was really good, but eventually it just felt kind of like, wait, we've got banter and then we fall head over heels for one another, and like where was the tension in between? Because I love good banter, but I do need there to be some tension, some lead up, like make me work for it a little bit, not just banter for bantering. And I felt like that's kind of what happened here. They never really felt like they disliked each other. It felt like the banter was on page because the author thought it needed to be, not because it felt genuine to the characters. And then there was supposed to be this big heist, but it only took up about 10% of the book, and the rest of it was them just traveling around doing things like cooking, and it just never really gripped my attention in the way that I wanted it to. It wasn't a bad book, but I definitely wanted and expected a lot more from it given how everybody was talking about it. So I'm hoping the next book gives me that, but it could have had such a good heist, it could have had incredible politics, it could have had a good battle scene, it could have had great tension, and instead it just gave me a boring book. That was my 5 most disappointing. Now let's chat about my 5 worst books of the year. Coming in at number 5 is A Crown of Ash and Silver. I think I blocked half of this book out of my brain. I really should have DNF'd it. It's a wintry romantasy with fae and supposed to be a bodyguard trope, but ends up being fated mates, and like the bodyguard trope was not good, and I went back to look and see what I said about it on Goodreads, and I disliked it so much and was so apathetic to it that I didn't even write a review for it. But I just remember slogging through this thinking, wait, why? This doesn't even make sense. Like, we're just jumping from thing to thing to thing and dropping in all of these tropes because we feel like they should be here, but none of them have any explanation to them. None of them make sense. They're just thrown in there, and like, why? Why are they even here? How does this relate to the rest of the plot? Like, the characters' motivations didn't make any sense, and I think I just blocked this book out. It was a easy 2-star, should have DNF'd kind of book, and I was so disappointed because the like arranged marriage, bodyguard type trope situation that we had on the synopsis of the book was something that I thought was going to be absolutely incredible, and it missed the mark so hard. Then is a horror that I read for Sav's book club, so sorry Sav, and that is This Wretched Valley. This was a debut and it showed. The prologue was really interesting. We do kind of find out how the book is going to end with the prologue. It is a survivalist story, but this book just tried so hard to be weird and like push the boundaries that instead it really didn't make a whole lot of sense and was so boring. Like, all of the characters were unlikable, which is fine. I appreciate a good unlikable character, and they didn't, like, nothing that they did really made sense. It was so hard to keep up with who was who because they all sounded the exact same, and their motivations for doing things completely no sense whatsoever. Push that with some of these like weird scenes that she was trying to put in there for the effect, and all it's ended up doing was just seeming dumb and redundant because they didn't make any sense with the overall plot of the story. It was just in there to be in there, and I think that's like the biggest complaint that I have, and how something ends up on my worst books of the year list, because you can't just throw things in there to get across like all of your check boxes. It still has to make sense for the story, or I'm gonna find it dumb, and I definitely found it dumb here. Book number 3 is Born of Blood and Shadows. I had this as an arc, and I read it for my first Reader Rejected episode and was so disappointed in this. Like, I should have DNF'd this. It was probably, I gave it a 2-star. In my brain it feels more like a 1-star. It's supposed to be this romantasy where we have witches and fae, and witches can only control one type of magic, and our main character's parents died and she rescues this fae, and she's trying to get him to teach her to do all of these types of magic, so she goes with him, but she also looks exactly like one of their long lost fae princesses, and it's just so uninteresting. The romance felt like 2 sticks in the mud talking to one another. They had zero chemistry at all, like none, zero, zilch. But like, our main character was so, I am amazing, I am incredible, you're gonna do what I want, you're gonna do everything and teach me this because I am the most powerful witch ever, I'm amazing. And then the guy was just kind of like, yeah, sure, we'll do that. And it just didn't, like, there was no tension, there was no banter. At one point, she basically links her soul to his and asks him to participate in this spell, and he's like, sure, cool, whatever. Doesn't even ask what the consequences are, doesn't ask what she's doing, and then realizes about 100 pages later, it's like, oh, I probably shouldn't have let her do that. No crap! Like, I just, yeah, nope. The villain of the story that I think was supposed to be the villain, but was also kind of a love interest, was by far the most interesting character. When he came on page, I was finally like, okay, okay, somebody with some substance, but it was just such a small part of the book that it could not save it for me. Not it. Not it. Don't recommend. Then we have one that lands in most disappointing and worst book of the year all at the same time, and that is The Hunted Heir by Holly Renee. This is book 2 in the Veiled Kingdom, which I gave 4.5 stars and loved, and then gave The Hunted Heir 2 stars. This book could just not exist and I would be perfectly happy. It doesn't need to be here. We could have put just a little bit of the first part of it in book 1, moved the ending into book 3, and just cut this one out entirely, and I would have been a very, very happy camper, because this was the most useless book. It was extremely repetitive. We had the same scenes happening over and over and over again. There was a character added just to try to give us some like drama and be another love interest, even though we knew already that he wasn't. So even though his scenes were more entertaining, they also felt so useless because it was glaringly obvious that he had no chance, and so it never made me root for them at all, because I was like, well, I don't care about this. This is not ever gonna happen. And then Dacker, who was amazing, incredible, bully, potty mouth, like dirty talk, crawl for me in book 1, absolutely incredible, sure, I'll crawl for you, was such a simp in this book. Like, he went from I hate you, you're the worst, I'm gonna do this because I have to, and we hate attract to one another, to she's my everything, I love her so much, I would do anything for her, oh my goodness, let me find her and let me give up everything that I've ever worked for her. And I didn't buy it. I didn't buy it at all. So unfortunately, this was a hard miss for me, and I hate that I have a book that could have ended up on my honorable mentions and a book that was the worst of the year in the same series. This happens to me every year. This happened last year too with There Are No Saints and There Is No Devil. One of them on the best of the year list, one of them on the worst of the year list. And last but not least is To Bleed a Crystal Bloom by Sarah A. Parker. I read The Wind the Moon Hatched, really enjoyed it. Yes, she's a little purpley prosy. Yes, that book could have stood for some more plot and to being a little bit shorter, but overall I really enjoyed it. To Bleed a Crystal Bloom, not it. There was like there was so many things in this book that made no sense, and I think she was just trying to like shove things in there for the mystery and to make you wonder like, what's going on? Oh my goodness, what are these creatures? What is this? And instead it just made things really confusing and not make any sense. And then we have this guy that basically raised her as a dad but is also going to be the romantic love interest, and she sees him kind of as a caring father but then also hates him, and the dynamic was just really weird there. It wasn't really a like age gap type of thing, because I don't mind me a 150-year-old vampire with a 20-year-old girl, like that's all fine. But in this one, because it was presented as kind of like daddy but not daddy kink, it did not work. The writing was very, very purpley prosy, just like her When the Moon Hatched was. I feel like it was worse in To Bleed a Crystal Bloom in my opinion, and there was just basically no plot and no world to this. Like, it was on the outskirts and we knew it was there, but considering that was one of my favorite things about When the Moon Hatched, I needed to see a lot more than that. It was basically just her running around and being a captive but not a captive, because she could still do whatever she wanted. And then there wasn't really like, I don't know, it tried to do too much and did none of it well. We're gonna go with that. I'm gonna leave it at that. So those are my 10 worst, 5 most disappointing, 5 worst books of the year. Let me know if I crushed your heart and soul down in the comments below. Did I have one of my books on here that was your favorite, or did you agree with me? I want to know both, preferably if you agreed with me, but I will definitely take both. Thank you guys so much for hanging out, listening to me rant for a few minutes. It was a good time. I'm hoping to have less of these books next year, and I you know what, I'm good with that. I'm good to weed through a few duds to get to some favorites, and again, a lot of times it's the same author, so you just never know. If you guys missed my best books of the year video though, you definitely want to check that out, because that's where I scream and cry about some books for a while, and that's going to be on the screen for you guys. As always, thank you so very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!